So in this session, we're discussing the obstacles that you're likely to face in your profit exits. Now, we've talked a lot about profit exits already, and I've explained all the different rules of how to exit correctly, the different principles, and even some things that can help you, such as using statistics to allow you to have better profit exits. But despite all of this stuff, you may have some real psychological obstacles that will hinder you and block you from being able to exit correctly on a consistent basis. So this session is all about addressing those directly and kind of digging under the surface, uncovering them, and once you have an awareness of them, then you're a lot less likely to fall into these unconscious traps that keep you from being able to actually execute profit exits according to plan. All right? So having said that, let's start with the first obstacle, and in my opinion, the one that actually greatly leads to the other two, or is at the basis of the other two. And that first obstacle is the myth that it's wrong to let a winner turn into a loser. Now, if you've read anything about trading, and you've heard the common wisdom out there, you've surely heard the phrase, never let a winner turn into a loser. Well, by now you should know how I feel about common trading wisdom, okay? And this is no exception, right? This is one of my pet peeves in terms of common trading wisdoms. The saying that never let a winner turn into a loser. And I think it's one of the worst and most harmful pieces of advice out there. And let's discuss the reason for that. First of all, to look at a phrase like this, you have to ask yourself naturally, well, okay, if it's so wrong to let a winner turn into a loser, what is a winner? What is defined as a winner? Is it one tick if you're trading, let's say, the E-minis or other futures? Is it 1 cent if you're trading a stock? I mean, what is it? Is it 1 pip if you're trading Forex? What is a winner? And some people might say, well, no, it has to be at least substantial. But what is substantial? I mean, this saying, the problem with it is that it's so loose and just doesn't really define what it's truly talking about. And so people often misinterpret it like is normal in such situations. Okay, so now let's look at it from another perspective. Regardless of what a winner is, why is it so wrong to let a winner turn into a loser? Have you ever stopped to ask that? Let's say you put on a trade with a 2 point stop and a 12 point potential exit that, under the current context, had a pretty decent chance of getting there, all right, giving you the 12 points. Well, when you're up 2 points, you have a winner. Is it wrong to let this quote unquote winner of 2 points turn into a loss if the potential is 12 points and the odds in the context is there? Is it really wrong? If you actually got up 2 points and then it somehow turned around and turned into a loser, would you say, oh, how could I let this winner turn into a loser? Well, I beg to differ. And the problem with this piece of advice, or this myth, as I call it, is the fact that it works in a vacuum. It basically tells you, well, anytime you're making money, you have a winner and don't let it turn into a loser. But to follow this piece of advice, you will never have, or rarely ever, have large winners. Because by default, to have a large winner, especially in more rotational markets like the E-mini indices and others like that, to get any decent sized winner, you often have to hold through pretty decent retracements. It'll go 2-3 points your way, then it'll come back, then it'll go again, it'll come back, and that's just part of it. You have to sit through that to reach certain price objectives, certain profit objectives, most of the time. Sometimes you'll get lucky and it just takes off, but a lot of the time, you just have to sit through these things. Often you'll get in a zone, and like we've talked about before, the first reaction your way and you think it's good, but then it just comes back and balance is there, right? And if you're worried about letting a winner turn into a loser, you're always going to feel like you can't afford to let it go 2 points your way without taking profit. But then that takes you into the trap of always scaling out, which we discussed before. So this is the problem with this thing, is that it creates wrong trading behaviors. It becomes a stigma where traders feel like they themselves are losers if they let a winner turn into a loser. All right? And that takes me to obstacle number 2, which is greatly related to this, and that's the fear of regret and your own negative self-talk. All right? So what ends up happening when you believe that I should never let a winner turn into a loser, then when you do, regardless of the circumstance and regardless of the reason, you're going to start regretting. How could I have done that? How could I let a winner turn into a loser? That is a trading rule you should never break. And then what's going to happen? You're going to have start negative self-talk. I'm not a good trader. I'm a loser if I let a winner turn into a loser. And you're going to get down on yourself, right? And why this is an obstacle, and this is a bit of a tricky one, but this is a psychological obstacle because you start fearing the regret and your self-talk, and that's why this obstacle is the fear of these things. All right? So unconsciously, you know that if you let a winner turn into a loser, you're going to feel regret and you're going to talk negatively to yourself, right? You won't forgive yourself, you start being harsh on yourself. And you know this is going to happen. So what ends up happening is that you actually start getting scared of this happening. You start unconsciously anticipating this and wanting to avoid it because you don't like that feeling of beating yourself up and being harsh with yourself and feeling regretful. So to avoid it, what do? You don't let a winner turn into a loser. Anytime you have 1 or 2 ticks of profit, you feel like you need to lock some in because you don't want to feel bad, right? So now fear starts controlling you. And this is directly related to the first obstacle, the stigma of letting a winner turn into a loser. But then there's also a natural fear in itself, and that's obstacle number 3, which is the fear of losing something you have acquired. And this is a natural fear, and it relates back to loss aversion, but now from the profits side. And now that you've gained these profits, all of a sudden there's a great fear of losing them. And it hurts more to lose something that you now have versus losing an opportunity to get something, right? So now, let's say you're up a point and there's 5 points of profit left. Well, just based on human psychology, now missing out on those 5 points does not hurt as much as losing a point that you already have, right? And this is just part of human psychology. That's how it works. So this is a fear that's going to affect you, and it's also going to relate back to that stigma because now not only do you have this just natural human fear of losing something you've just acquired, but you also have this stigma and this myth that tells you you should never be doing this. So it just makes it even worse and goes back to obstacle 2, which is more regret and more being harsh on yourself. So they're all kind of interrelated. So what is the solution? Well, there's really 2 major solutions, and the first major one is to change the rules of the game. And by this I mean to directly address the first obstacle, which says never let a winner turn into a loser, right? And by change the rules of the game, I mean take that and scratch it out of your mind. That is wrong advice. And what you want to change it to is to never keep holding a trade once the reasons for it are gone or once the market has invalidated its premises. So it's a very different thing. So for instance, if again going back to that example, I just took a trade with a 2-point stop and 12 points of potential, and it's 2 points in my direction, and I see something extremely off, like just something either from the internals not confirming or some other related market showing a great divergence or something that's now showing me that the bias I thought was there intraday is not really what I thought, whatever it is, then it doesn't make sense to let it turn into a loser, right? Whether it's 1 point, 2 points, 5 points, it doesn't matter. At that point, you either scale out or you lock in your profits. And so the point is to always look at it from the market's perspective. not from some random rule that says never let a winner turn into a loser, not from your P&L that determines what a winner is, but from the market's perspective. And as long as the reasons for the trade are still there, or nothing outright is greatly opposing them, then you should not exit simply for fear of letting a winner turn into a loser, right? That would be wrong. And in fact, that becomes your new rule, right? So now, instead of having the stigma of never let a winner turn into a loser and thinking you're breaking the rules and you're being a bad trader whenever you do, your new rule becomes you only exit when it makes logical sense from the market's perspective to do so. And if that means that a trade that has 12 points of potential goes 4 or 5 points in your direction and doesn't really show any signs that it's failing, it just doesn't, and then it just comes back, and the market does that sometimes, like as if it's balancing, right? Without anything changing in the context, without any other signs, it just comes back and starts balancing around your entry point, and you're correctly holding because nothing has been invalidated, and then out of nowhere, just suddenly it just shoots right through and hits your stop, then you have not made a mistake. You've actually stuck to the rules, and you should be proud of it instead of thinking, how could I let this quote unquote winner turn into a loser? In reality, it was never really a winner in the sense, because based on your analysis, based on the context and all that, a trade only becomes a true winner, or we only define it to be a winner, once it gets to a point where it shouldn't come back to your entry, and that would imply that something is really wrong in the market. Okay, and that's the key point here. So when you change your definitions like that, things change. You no longer feel guilty or bad for letting a winner turn into a loser, because you're only defining something as a winner not by its P&L, right? Because again, what is a winner in terms of P&L? Is it 1 tick, 2 ticks, 3 ticks? Where is that line drawn? You can never really know. So you don't define it by your P&L, you define it by the context and what's correct based on the trade. And only when it hits that point of no return, where it just moved far enough that now if it were to come back to your entry point, something would be wrong. It would no longer be just balancing at a zone. It would be literally a reversal, like it shouldn't come back here. Then you can, in your mind, declare it a winner and not let that winner turn into a loser, i.e. move your stop to break even or scale out if the context is correct or whatever it may be. But before that point, you do not do that. Okay, and so just changing the rules of the game in this way completely changes your psychology. It changes what you naturally feel bad about and what you're going to regret. Now, if you have a 2 or 3 point winner and your profit objective was much larger and the market didn't show anything that would say that it was failing or that it was bad to continue holding, then you have no reason to feel bad. In fact, you feel good because you stuck to the rules of the game. So that's huge. But then solution number 2, which is also needed to be able to consistently have correct profit exits, is to practice self-awareness, and we come back to this same issue. See, solution number 1 should take care of this fear of regret and fear of talking negatively to yourself, because now you'll be proud for following the rules and no longer think that it's such a bad thing to let a winner turn into a loser. So that'll take care of it. But then you'll still have this natural human emotion of not wanting to lose something you've just acquired. So you need to practice self-awareness here and recognize when this is happening, right? Recognize those feelings. Those feelings are going to arise in you that says, oh, I don't want to let this thing turn into a loss, right? You're going to start thinking, I don't care if there's 6 more points of profit. I don't want to let 2 points go because it's in my hand. And you might start thinking like, a bird in the hand is worth 2 on the bush, or those kind of sayings. Well, that may be true in general in life, but here again, we think of long-term odds, and we think not on this particular trade. We think, if I did 100 of these trades, would I come out ahead in the end if I do this particular action, right? In life, sometimes it's harder to make these decisions because they come around once or twice. And so yes, in life, a bird in the hand is better than 5 on the bush, because you never know if you're going to get to have the opportunity to get it again. But in trading, you're going to have trade after trade after trade after trade, right? And you have to be thinking long-term expectation, not what is best to do in this specific instance. And so when you practice self-awareness, you're going to feel this feeling arising, and it's not going to remain unconscious and control you. You're going to be aware of it. You're going to realize, hey, this is just my natural human tendency to not want to lose something that I've just acquired. You welcome the feeling, right? You don't judge yourself for it. And then you do the other things that we've already talked about. You reframe, you remind yourself of the correct rules, and you do the various other things that allow you to trade correctly. But the basis of it is self-awareness, because if you're not aware of this feeling, then it'll just control you unconsciously, and everything that we've taught you up till now about how to exit correctly will just fly out the window, and you'll react emotionally. All right, so both these things are needed. And once you have these solutions, then those obstacles will no longer be issues, and you will be able to get better and better at exiting more correctly on a consistent basis. And that's what it's all about. It's just getting better and better. It's never going to be perfect, but you want to get better and better at it. All right, and this session is really going to give you an edge in doing that, because while everyone else is driven around by their emotions, their unconscious feelings, and by these stigmas and myths out there that say, hey, never let a winner turn into a loser, you won't. And you'll be able to hold better, and all of this will go straight to your bottom line. So go ahead and create that new rule for yourself, change the rules of the game, and know that the new rules are simply for your benefit.